Hello and welcome to another episode of the Accredited Investors Only podcast presented by Accredited Life. I'm your host, Peter Neal. Thank you so much for being here with me today. We have an amazing interview lined up, and I want to get into that in a minute. But as always, I like to ask, are you living your accredited life? One thing that's come up this week that I've been thinking a lot about is reframing the way that we look at situations, the way that we think about situations and all. I think this is such a powerful tool that we can use in all aspects of our life. So I've mentioned this before on the podcast. I like to look at things as self, health, and wealth. And then there's all these different elements that are involved in each one of those. So self is our relationship to God, our relationship to community, to our friends, to our family. It involves all of that, our relationship to ourselves. Health is the relationship with our body, our minds, mentally, physically. Wealth, same thing. It's not just how much money's in the bank account or how many the assets under management, our net worth, our cash flow, that kind of thing. But it's wealth in the way that we look at things, in the way that we show up, and just the kind of the abundance mindset maybe that we bring to certain situations and to our life in general. So we talk a lot about the importance of reflection and the importance and with the first stage of living the accredited life as your foundation. A big part of that is taking the time to really look at where you come from, where you are today, and then it moves into where you want to be. So a lot of that is about reflecting on where you're at. And to do it in all those different aspects of your life, where you're at, with yourself, with your relationships, with your health, with your mental well-being, your physical well-being, with your health, with your wealth, financially, and just, overall, the way you look at things, all that kind of stuff. It's important to reflect in all those different aspects on a regular basis, because I think a lot of us at different points in our life, we can focus more, and it's natural to do that, on one thing over the other and prioritize wealth over, your relationships and yourself and your health. That's such a thing where, it's, you just sometimes have, you in the hierarchy of importance there with those three buckets, you put one above the other, that kind of thing. So I think it's important to every now and again take time to look at all of those different aspects, look at your life holistically, and then look at the parts of your life that you need that you'd like to see improvement, that you need to see improvement, and then kind of reframe the situation for yourself and to try to look at things differently, because you might think, that's just, I can't do that. I'm not, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the relationships. A lot of times I think time is a big one, right? It's just, we have limited hours in the day. We have all, responsibilities that we've signed ourselves up for or have in work and, with our family and things like that. But how can you, if you take the time, can you look at those situations and those beliefs that are maybe holding you back and find a way to reframe them and to look at them differently and to maybe see them as an opportunity? Because I think it's really important, the way that we think about certain things and the way and what we kind of believe around, what's possible can really shape our actions. And then we don't do certain things because of it. So I challenge you this week to look at how you can reframe the situations in your life that maybe you feel you are holding you back, or you feel like that you would like to see improve over the next few weeks, few months, and few years and all. And maybe next week we'll talk about, some vision and how we can, because that kind of really plays into that as well. How we can shape that for our short-term and long-term vision and use that reframing to be a very powerful motivator and powerful inspiration to change our lives and do something different. So without further ado, we have a great interview lined up today with Matt Fore. He's a sales leader who's held various positions in sales and sales leadership at one of the largest technology companies in the world. Today, Matt is a partner at Next Level Income. That is a $1 billion plus real estate private equity firm that focuses on all different asset classes: multifamily, self-storage, mobile home parks, car washes, and various real estate debt. Matt's got a lot going on. It's not just all about work for Matt. He's an avid reader. He enjoys training for Ironman triathlons and convincing his brother that he is the favorite twin. So I love that. Without further ado, let's get right into this awesome interview with Matt Fore.
You're listening to the Accredited Investors Only podcast presented by Accredited Life.
Matt, welcome to the show. How you feeling today?
I am fantastic. Thanks for having me, Peter.
That's awesome. So it's great for you to be here. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience in your own words, Matt?
Yeah, sure. So Matt Fore, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I got involved in real estate, or I guess in my personal and professional life, I've been involved in technology and technology sales for the past 20 years. How I got involved in real estate, though, was I work in sales because it's one of the only jobs where you can kind of create your own income stream. I had a boss one time that was like, if you want to go get a raise, then just sell more. So it just kind of made sense to me. Well, back in 2015, I was part of a pretty monumental deal. We landed a net new customer. It was an 8-figure deal. And I saw what I was going to get on a commission check. And so I reached out to a bunch of people like, hey, what do I do with this money? I'm from a rural small town in East Tennessee. It's not like I'm big into fancy cars, boats, watches, things like that. And I heard everything from Bitcoin to stocks to bonds. But I had a friend and a mentor at the time who was like, hey, you should really look at this real estate thing. He had owned 3 properties in cash at that point. And they were spinning off cash flow, appreciation, tax benefits, kind of checked all the boxes that I wanted to check. And then I got the call the week of Christmas that year from my VP at the time who said I was not going to get that commission check. In fact, I was only going to receive 2 cents on the dollar.
Whoa.
And it was at that point that I was like, okay, hey, if I want to build the life that I want to build, if I want to create and give to the causes that I want to give to, then I'm going to have to go do something else to secure my financial independence. So fortunately for me, I was already down this rabbit hole of real estate, had already done the rich dad, poor dad, bigger pockets stuff, and bought my first property probably 2 to 3 months right after that. And then ultimately started scaling from there. So happy to go into any part of that, but that's my history and background.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there, and that's Jesus. How did that happen with the commission check thing? I gotta ask the question. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, every big organization has in their T's and C's and their commission docs and all that kind of stuff. We can change your customers, we can change your quota, we can cap commissions, all that sort of thing. I think, Peter, the thing that bothered me about that situation is that I went to them early and said, hey, I've been a part of Fortune 50 companies before. I know you're not going to pay that. Let's just talk about how do we get to an equitable kind of middle ground.
Sure.
And they were like, no, that's why you came here. That's why you were given this acquisition territory to go build new customers and all this sort of stuff. And they pushed me off. But ultimately, like, everybody that was a part of that deal got paid something different. And I thought that was a very strong sense of like, hey, where do you value each employee? And when you start messing with people's money, it's a different conversation.
Yeah, no, it's certainly, and it's a motivator to do something else, right? And probably in a lot of ways you look back and you think that happened for a reason, right? It's driven you into what you do today, and also, so talk to me about your real estate journey. It sounds like you had a mentor there that owned a couple single family homes, I'm going to assume. How is your investing? How did it start, and how has it evolved over the years?
Yeah, so friend had 3 single family homes, so I quickly bought a home right around the corner for me. It was this pocket of Nashville that kind of had gotten skipped over, so it was in this path of progress. It was a new build. It's not my best cash flowing property, but I've had 0 issues with that property since it was a brand new build over the past 10 years. So it's been great property from that since.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. But, quickly scaled from there and started buying some wholesale deals, did a couple flips, a couple burrs and things like that. And as I continued to scale my career, though, that I realized, hey, I can't be flipping properties and traveling like I was traveling and trying to do the things that I was doing. So ultimately, like, kind of got turned on to this idea of passive investing and syndications, and started off with a couple multifamily deals. And then my current partner was saying, hey, I'm trying to grow my business and grow this thing that I've got going here. Does it make sense to partner up and we go scale that together? So since then, we basically focus on three different aspects, multifamily, mobile home parks, and then we have our own debt fund as well.
Okay.
And we've kind of scaled quickly. So yeah.
That's amazing. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Were you still working at the time when you got in? It sounds like you probably were kind of balancing work with real estate on the side, and then how did you make the leap to full time?
Yeah, it's a slow process, right? I don't believe in burning the boats and jumping all in and things like that. I mean, certainly if I was 22 or 24, that would have made sense. But I have a family, kids,
Yeah.
it is one of those things, the older you get, the more your bills tend to stack up somehow. Kids soccer,
Yeah.
camps at on the weekends and things like that. So I wanted to make sure that I was thinking about it the right way. And what I found though is that as I continued to build kind of my asset pool as well as my passive income, that I could perform better in my W-2 at the time because it was no longer like I need to go get this sale. I need to push to go do this. I need to play the political games and those sorts of things. It allowed me to free my mind of like, hey, food is always going to be on our table because we have this income stream. A roof will always be over our head because we have this income stream. How can I go focus on what's really impactful versus trying to do everything?
Gotcha. So hmm, that's a good mindset shift, right? It allows you to think about things in a different way, and like you said, kind of frees you up in certain things. How would you say it kind of shift your perception over time? And it sounded like you have some causes that you have gotten involved with and want to continue to be involved with, and also. Talk to me about that, just the mind shift kind of part of it, and too on the side of like go because I think people could look at it the opposite way too, of like going from having a steady paycheck. Now you were in sales, so I'm assuming there was maybe a base, maybe not even, you know what I mean? So you kind of already knew that lifestyle a little bit. But for others, where it's like 9 to 5, where every 2 weeks or whatever their pay schedule is, they're getting hit with a paycheck, and it's hard to make that leap, and because with real estate, especially if it's not, at full scale kind of a thing, if one of the tenants stop paying and all, it can create some stress within your life. So it sounds like you probably had coming from a sales position, you kind of knew that, you knew some of those things foundationally going in, but how has it changed your mindset over the years?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is my view on money has really evolved in how we build our net worth and how we build our cash flow streams. So, for example, I mean, traditional advice right now is stock money into a 401k, basically bury it in the ground and then hope that a tree pops up. And then you can go pick the fruits from that tree, those apples per se,
Hmm.
at a later time. And really, as I've gotten involved, I really care about cash flowing assets because cash flow is how you pay your bills today, and net worth is kind of how you pay your bills tomorrow. So real estate balances
Sure.
that in between of if it can cash flow today and appreciate above inflation over the long run, then it's probably going to be a good bet. So when I was looking at like, hey, I'm going to just pump money into this 401k and hope that there's more money later, it really evolved my thinking around, well, the whole point is that I siphon from that later and have a cash flow stream. So why wouldn't I build that cash flow stream today? And I don't know if that's where you were going with that
Yeah.
question, but
Yeah.
it is a realization that I want everybody I talk to kind of come to is that yes, it's great to put money in a 401k. It's great to have equities. Real estate is a strategy. It's not the strategy, but ultimately what's your end goal? Your end goal is to have enough cash flow coming in to pay for your life later. So why not start building that today in parallel?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And when you look at what you guys are investing in today with multifamily, mobile home parks, debt, these are traditionally good cash flowing type investments. And I always think that's important because I think a lot of times accredited investors that they have certain goals, but they don't always necessarily know which asset classes or which type of properties are going to help them to reach those goals. And in dealing with a lot of investors and having a lot of conversations over the years with from a goal perspective, it's always funny. I'll hear people tell me this is what their short-term, long-term goals are. But then they'll call you in a few months and be like, "Oh, could you look at this, development deal or something like that?" And it's like, well, your goals were more on the cash flow, short-term, replace your income, that kind of thing. The development deal might not be the best for you. I mean, debt fund might be better, or a mobile home park fund, might be better. Compared to somebody who's like, well, I'm making, plenty of money now, or I already have cash flowing investments in place, and now I want to build equity and that kind of thing. Then the development deal is perfect for them. So sometimes I think that people don't always realize that depending, and that's why it's so important to know what your goals are. You know what I mean? Depending on what they are, if it's short-term income, long-term appreciation, or some combination of the two, which is probably typically the case, right? There could be investments that you're making that are going to help you to achieve that, or bring you closer to it, or further away. So that was, that was kind of, it seems like that's what you were thinking, with these three buckets that you're currently investing in now.
Yeah, and I also think too, what type of investor are you, right? There's your goals that you want to have, a certain net worth, a certain cash flow, et cetera. But then the type of investor that you are will help dictate how you get to those goals. So what do I mean by that? I think, for example, everybody wants to build some sort of net worth. I'm sure you have a dollar number in mind. I certainly have a dollar number in mind. I certainly have a timeline around it and those sorts of things. There's a number of different ways I can get there. One of those ways is Bitcoin. Bitcoin in 2016 looked like the dumbest thing in the world. And then 2017, 2018 happened. It went through the roof and we were all sitting on the sidelines being like, man, we really missed that momentum, right?
Sure.
And then 2020, and then it had a little pullback and maybe you didn't feel as bad about not being involved in it. And then 2020 and 2022 happens and you're like, what in the world? I missed out on this train. I'm such an idiot. I saw this coming. I had an opportunity to get back in and I didn't get back in. And then 2023 happened and you were like, well, this is down again. So maybe it's not valuable. Well, shoot. Yeah. As we're recording this, Bitcoin just hit its all-time high at 94,000 again. Yeah. And for me, I don't love the choppiness of it. Right. I know as an investor that it's going to it's going to sit in my subconscious all day about what's the price of Bitcoin if sure. That's my goal of getting to my net worth target. Now, for some people, I've got a good friend who is very involved into crypto and he likes the riskiness of it. He feels that a risk on and the liquidity of that situation is great. For me, I know that it's just simple math. If we backtest real estate or look at it over the course of the past 150 years, I can make some reasonable assessments of where it's going to be 25 years from now. And I don't have to worry about somebody knocking on my door every day and saying, this is what it's worth, this is what it's worth, and that sort of thing. So it takes out the emotion behind it. So knowing what type of investor you are will help you also clarify what type of investments are best for you as an investor and your goals that you have.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I think that's something that gets missed a lot, is taking the time to know yourself and your strengths, your weaknesses, what it is that you really want at the end of the day, and then going out and having conversations and listening to podcasts, reading articles and forums and things like that to figure out how you're going to get to that. So talk to me about your company now and who you work with, how you work with them, and when you're doing a few different things. So I'm interested in how you're managing that. Are you partnering with operators? Are you guys the operator? Talk to me about the company now and just how it works.
Yeah, so company is Next Level Income. I mentioned we focus really on three main asset classes: multifamily, mobile home parks, and our debt fund. We only really do deals in the Southeast. We did have a mobile home park that kind of fell into our lap over in Kansas that we ended up executing on. But for the most part, like our criteria, our buy box is in the Southeast. So to kind of walk you through that real quick, on the multifamily side, for me, multifamily is one of those like, you're never going to make $1 billion buying multifamily. You're never going to lose $1 billion as long as you can hold the asset and not have to be forced to sell because of a debt position or redemption requests and things like that, chances are it's going to be better over the long term. So what we essentially look for are large metropolitan areas in the Southeast. I call them NFL cities. We do have some properties that aren't in NFL cities, but they're well-known cities. And we look for new build properties. Anything that's between 2004, I think, is our oldest asset, all the way into 2022. We're looking for newer build properties where it's a lease up strategy. We can add some sort of value with Wi-Fi packages, putting them in tax abatement programs, things like that. So we're not the guys that are going to go find a 1970s asset, pump in a bunch of couple $1 million and hope that it's going to be more valuable in the long run. A lot of people have made tons of great money doing that, but there's also a lot of risk associated with that. So what we want to do is just find newer properties that aren't going to have a lot of CapEx expenditures, where we can just improve operations or find some sort of way to add value through extra levers. Now, I converse that with our mobile home strategy. So mobile homes is on the opposite end of the income bracket and demographic bracket. But we believe that there will be more of a need for affordable housing over the next 10, 20 years than less of a need. Sure. So you already have a demand wave coming down towards your way in that path. As you may know, mobile home parks, they don't build them anymore. There's a lot of reasons for that, but ultimately it comes down to not in my backyard. Every city council person you ever hear talks about affordable housing until it comes to a solution for it. And then they say, we'd rather have that nice multi-use property with Whole Foods at the bottom and Class A buildings at the top, et cetera, because it receives more tax dollars. At the end of the day, property is worth more, property tax is higher, we can receive more tax dollars. So at the end of the day, they're not building anymore. So if you're in this position where you own affordable housing and demand is going to increase and supply is actually decreasing, that's just a good economic position to be in. And we're making our bet there. And then on the last side of it is just the debt fund. So we lend out to fix and flippers that you see on HGTV. Most people think that that's they buy things in cash. They don't buy things in cash. They borrow it from people like us that have liquidity on a short-term basis. So the good thing about that is you can exit these loans on a 6-month, 9-month basis on high interest rates. So we lend out to fix and flippers who have a proven track record. I think it's like 82% of our borrowers are repeat borrowers. So we're not lending to the guy that just went through a course and wants to flip $1 million home. We're lending to seasoned borrowers. And it's just a cash flow play. So no equity, no appreciation. Just if you're looking for us to clip a coupon with an asset that's backed by real estate, that's a good solution for our business.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's one of the best. What do the rates usually look like that you're lending at? Just curious.
That we're lending out to?
Yeah.
It depends. We're scaling right now from 12 to 15. Okay. I'm more on the upper side of that right now.
Yeah. And what markets are you typically doing that in?
Heavy in the Carolinas. So our operations group is based out of South Carolina. So a lot of our loans are in North Carolina and South Carolina. We've dipped our toe into Georgia. We've dipped our toe over into Tennessee. I'm trying to say this the right way. Like, we're looking to expand, but we don't want to go lend to new borrowers, and we're not always going to be the cheapest money. And we understand that if you're an experienced flipper out there, you probably have lines of credit that you're already using or lenders that you're already leveraging. So we'd love to compete for that business, but we're not going to take a risk on a new borrower in a new market and try to grow our business that way.
Yeah. That would be like the equivalent of the vintage multifamily, right? You're adding a little bit, you're adding another layer of risk in. So how do you balance the three? How do you balance those three worlds within the company? Does one person kind of own each section, or how are you operating those three types of businesses? And then, when you guys buy a multifamily property or you buy a mobile home park, are you the operator? Then I'm assuming you work with property management, or do you do that in house? Speak to me about like the operations of the company. I'm always fascinated when people are doing a few different buckets, because I think that provides great diversification. But I know from raising capital, I'm sure you get the question all the time, is how do you balance each three, and how are you finding deals in each three, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So we We do the operations, but we're not the property managers. So I like to always clarify that.
Yeah.
That gets confusing to some investors. What do you mean you're not doing the property? No, we have somebody that's a leasing agent on site, multiple leasing agents on site, people that are responsible for coordinating maintenance and things like that. We have weekly calls with them to make sure that they're staying on track, hitting their KPIs and all those sorts of things.
Mhm.
But if you need me to go chase down Billy Bob for rent, like I'm not that guy. Um,
And I
we
will
partner.
preface that is a great strategy. You know what I mean? I think sometimes people get really caught up with vertical integration and things like that, and it's like that's right for some people, and it's not right for others. You know, and it depends on your size and a bunch of different things. But it's like as an operator, sometimes it's good to just be operating, you know, and not be now managing a property management company on top of that and everything else that comes along with it. So that is a great strategy. Yeah. And then too, I'm assuming you're working with local experts that have scale in the area that they're in and all, and they provide a lot of value, you know, for the services that they provide and all that kind of stuff. So I love that strategy, especially when you're doing multiple things. I think that's really smart.
Yeah, we found a large property management company that will go where we're going because they already have the scale and reach. Maybe they don't
Mm,
have someone in the part of Nashville that we're in, but they already have somebody in Nashville or the surrounding areas, as an example.
hmm
So because of that, like we develop a strong, deep relationship with them, right? When you have a couple thousand units with one property management company, they tend to answer your phone call when you call.
Yeah.
But also they have the reach throughout the Southeast where we operate. They don't have PM teams up in New York or Washington State
Mm.
or Oregon or anything like that, but they understand the Southeast and the
Mhm.
market drivers behind that.
Love it. So how do you how do you balance the three? Is there somebody that owns each part, or you know, is it just and how does it work from an acquisitions perspective, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we do not have an acquisitions team built out. I always try to clarify that as well. We're pretty lean on our side. So the way we kind of think about it is it internal facing, meaning property focused, operations focused? Is it externally facing, meaning investor communication, marketing, and things like that?
Hmm
Um, and then what was your question about the how do you balance that? So basically we have people assigned to
Okay,
internally and externally. So if it's going to be involved with property management, okay, here's your list of properties that you need to have these weekly calls and those sorts of things.
gotcha. So which how has that evolved over time? You know what I mean, how with interest rates and things like that, and then I'm curious to the mobile home parks that you guys are buying. How are they financed? Is it typically owner carried? You know, like I'm curious how that works. And are you actively looking for opportunities in all three areas at the moment? Or has that evolved? You know, does it ebb and flow depending on kind of what the market provides, that kind of thing, or
Yeah, I would say we're always underwriting for deals, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't say that we're always actively looking for deals. So there's a concentrated push on trying to acquire properties, and then there's a constant push to just keep maintain relationships so that when certain events happen that we've been through over the past couple of years, people at least think of you and send it your way first. On
Sure.
the mobile home park side, we are more actively engaged on trying to continue to lock up deals there.
Yeah.
To your question about financing, we, uh, I can't think of a deal that we've done in the mobile home park space that hasn't been owner carry, some sort of owner carry.
Yeah.
We are typically looking at properties that are like 50 to 70% occupied. And then we try to fill those up, clean up the tenant base, make sure the park's in a safe environment, most importantly, clean environment, importantly there. And then ultimately try to refinance that into agency debt.
Okay.
We've had a couple of successful refinances. We've acquired some stuff in 2022 that we're going through that process as well. But ultimately, like there's a ton of mom and pops in that space.
Yeah.
They're usually smaller acquisitions, under 2 million, under 5 million.
Oh, yeah.
So the owners kind of understand, hey, if I give you a big chunk of cash today down and we can pay an IO note for the next 3 years and refinance that into agency debt is essentially what we're looking for.
Yeah, gotcha. That's awesome. So talk to me about how you work with investors. You know, how do you deal with investors? Are you managing funds? Is it individual syndications? How's that work?
Yeah, we have two funds. So the debt fund is a fund, and really that's for investor benefit. One, it allows them to diversify across all the loans that we do. But
Yeah.
two, it also offers us the ability to do liquidity provisions on it. So we have a 90-day liquidity provision on it. You send us $1 today. 2 weeks from now, you get hit with a tax bill or an unexpected expense in your environment. We can have that money back to you in 90 days. Our average right now is 24 days. So we're pretty quick on turning that money around. But if that was in a one-to-one note, we wouldn't be able to offer that kind of liquidity provision on it. And if that note has to go through default or restructuring or something like that, then you're tied there. So the debt fund is a fund. Our mobile home parks, again, they're smaller acquisitions, and if you know much about the space, you know the legal cost of setting up a single 506C or 506B structure.
Mhm.
And so it started to become uneconomical for us to buy these parks in a single entity asset.
Mm.
So what we've ultimately done is set up a fund around it. And that also helps us with our long-term strategy, which I'll get into a second. But we've set up a fund around it to, one, have cash available to make acquisitions if they hit us in the face and we can be a first mover advantage. That typically is separating us because we're not playing in the 500 pads and above space. We're typically
Okay.
playing
Well,
in
and that was another question, just to paint the picture of the park. What's 2 million get you versus 5 million?
5 million probably gets you right at that 120, 150 lots, depending on the
Mhm.
space, occupancy, rent roll, NOI, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Um, and then 5 million is when you start getting over 200 pads, essentially.
Okay.
Um,
Gotcha.
so we set up a fund around it so that we could be competitive with the mom and pops out there that are looking for a quick exit, looking for a smooth exit and things like that.
Yeah.
And also it helps us from a strategy perspective. So the way we kind of have done our fund now is, instead of finding heavy value add 50 to 70% occupied parks, we balance the fund that says, hey, this is a pretty stable 85% occupied. All we need to do is kind of infill a few lots, fill up a few homes, and allow inflation to continue to raise lot rent over
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
With a, wow, this is a 50% occupied park. It's going to be extremely value add. So there's going to be a lot of hands on here. And it allows us to basically say, hey, if this 50% park does extremely well, you're going to get the huge tailwind behind this. If it has its struggles or runs into any roadblocks, well, we've got the cash flow from this other park to help us pay the preferred return and your cash on cash. So we built out a barbell strategy there.
Yeah, I like that. And then the multifamily, I'm assuming that usually an individual
That's
syndication.
all individual. Yep. Yep. I mean, the assets that we're acquiring are typically in the 70 to 100 million range. So those would be
Yeah,
tough to
newer
maneuver around.
assets, some pretty stabilized. That makes a lot of sense. So you had mentioned something about your long-term goal. So speak to me about that. I love to hear, especially companies that have a long-term vision. I think a lot of times, especially when people evolve from residential, single family, doing a few deals, I see people maybe get trapped in the multifamily space where it just becomes this fix and flips. Where, like you said, sometimes there's value add, 70, 80s vintage type properties where they're going in, they're adding value, and then they're selling off a few years later. So they're not necessarily creating that long-term cash flow that I think a lot of people, everybody, right, wants. So curious to your guys's long-term goal with the company, and then how long, for mobile home parks, would you ever want to sell them? Is that something you'll look at for a long-term hold? Obviously the debt fund is going to be something that kind of is, that's what they're coming due, and then you're turning around. And then same with the multifamily. I'm curious to your approach there. Is that something, as a 5 to 7 year hold? Are you looking to hold longer? So curious to just the kind of the overall vision and strategy when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think our long-term goal is to do things that we enjoy doing, interesting projects with people we enjoy doing with them with. And I say that because if you're listening to this podcast today and you're an accredited investor, it's important that you're aligned with your sponsor. I've had 3 calls this week, actually, Peter,
Hmm.
with investors that I'm like, hey, this isn't going to be a good fit for like where you're at and what we do.
Yeah.
I'm happy to connect you with some other folks, but if you've saved, 4 or 5 years, $50,000 and you want to plug it into an investment, like I don't feel good about that. That's not the type of investor we would want in this.
Yeah.
So to answer your question about specific asset classes, I mean, the multifamily, it's all about a 5 to 7 year turn. And the reason for that really is that the tax benefits start falling off
Sure.
on it. Obviously there's the economic incentive of we have to hit an IRR target in order for us to get paid on the back end. So our investors are going to get paid first. So we're always trying to balance this of if we never sell it, then ultimately we're never going to get paid because we haven't returned investor capital. So we do have to have some sort of exit there.
Okay.
In the mobile home park space, it's interesting. We're talking about that a lot here recently, because if I buy a park for $1 million and then we raise it to a $2.5-3 million valuation, is that something we keep? Is that something we recrystallize the capital stack and essentially buy our investors out? But that doesn't seem fair to them. Or is that something where we can just say, hey, here's where you would be if we sold it. We would like to keep the park. So if you would like to exit, we as the GPs will buy your shares and ultimately just hold it for the long term. Those are longer term conversations. We're not at that point yet. Right now, we're just as we increase value, we refi, we return investor capital. Now we've hit our waterfall and we're in a different level of the promote. So it kind of makes sense to hold the assets. But certainly there's going to be a couple here that are coming up where it's like, hey, do we hold this or do we sell it? What's the best move there?
Yeah.
But I guess long-winded way of saying what we're interested in doing is staying within our buy box, buying quality assets where we feel like we can add some sort of value to them, whether that's holding them and letting inflation do its thing, or adding value to it through infilling lots and things like that. But the people we surround ourselves, our team, our operators, our investors, we all want to make sure that we're all in alignment there.
Yeah, that's crucial, right? How do you find investors? I'm always curious to as somebody who raises capital, you guys do a lot of webinars, or I mean, how do you find investors? And then what's the conversation look like? Because you have different opportunities, I would think some might be better, but they're all somewhat similar, you know what I mean? But obviously a debt fund is with a 90-day redemption is going to be different than a multifamily with 5 to 7. So for you more than anyone, it's very important to understand what your investors' goals are and what opportunity within your company might be better or worse for them.
Yeah, how we find it is a lot of blocking and tackling. We don't do a ton of webinars. We started doing some webinars earlier this year just to engage the people that were already in our database. And it was things around where is multifamily today. We did do one talking a little bit about where crypto was and the halving experience that was going to happen in April, and just to put that on people's radar if they were interested in that. So we've done some stuff like that just to provide value, be a touch point, be a face into our investor base. But we haven't done a great job of that. I don't know if that's something we want to focus on more.
Yeah.
It's a lot of making sure that the people that come to you, whether they listen to you on a podcast or in your current investor base, are communicated with frequently, transparently, and you don't run away from problems.
Yeah.
Over the past 4 years, we've had our shares of roadblocks and stubbing our shins, right? Like, I don't think anybody that's truly been operating in this space for 5 years, for the past 5 years, can say that they haven't run into a roadblock. If you can, you're probably lying.
Sure.
We've had our share of that. And I think how you respond in those situations is either going to keep an investor for life, is going to lead to more referrals, or is going to get the SEC knocking on your door. And you don't have to go too far on Reddit to realize how many people are turning and running from their investors and hiding from that situation. So I think it's treating every investor that you have like they're your only investor, and being communicative with them and transparent is kind of how we've grown our investor base, because that has led to a bunch of referrals that we treat the same way, which leads you to more referrals and things like that.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you said that there. I mean, treating every investor like it's your only investor, because I hear it all the time. It blows my mind. I'm really big on communication and that side of the business, the investor relations side of the business, and it blows my mind the stories I hear from investors on. Just the communication, and not being able to get in touch with people. And it's something, we do a lot of marketing and stuff like that. And it's a challenge. It's been a challenge over the last few years with all these external things happening in the market with interest rates and some multifamily deals, not being underwritten properly and people running into issues and things like that on that side. And just bad syndicators and operators, you're going to have that in any market. But with interest rates, I feel like you've seen an increase of that over the last few years. It's evolved from, I think you were talking about it earlier, like not lending to the person who watches like an HGTV and then go takes a weekend seminar, and now they're house flippers. It's like now there's like literally fund managers and operators like and syndicators who went and took a weekend seminar, and they're a fund manager now or a syndicator. So it's just like I always think that's something for investors. It's important to ask those questions and to know the experience and the background and the track record and all that kind of stuff of the people that you're investing in. Because like you said, you're always going to run into challenges when you're operating a real estate investment company, because there's the three buckets. It's capital, acquisition, and execution. And you need to have those three things constantly working, at full speed along with each other. It's going to ebb and flow. And there's always issues or things you wish you could be doing better or you would have done differently or something like that within those three buckets. So to your point, yeah, if you're working with somebody who's never run into challenges, in any of those buckets, chances are they're not telling you the full story.
That's
And it's not so much about, investing with, and then in some ways, I think investors, I would look at it as you probably do to some degree. If you've never, it's like you're batting 1,000, you probably do. But it's about how you've overcome challenges, and how you've learned from them and how you, continue to evolve your business model and your operations and things like that around, those challenges and all. So I love that. And then, just not taking it. It is hard to get leads in this business. It is hard to get attention when there is so many, social media has made it easier to find people. But at the same time, it's created a lot of competition and stuff like that. So it does. It's like when you do get somebody, treating them right and getting back to them and understanding that they should be asking questions. And I mean, good questions is what leads to somebody understanding what they're investing in. And when somebody understands it, and they know you and trust you and all that kind of stuff, it's going to lead to an investor, right? So I love that mindset. For somebody that's interested in finding out more about yourself and your company and what you all do, how can they find out more?
Yeah, two spots. So one, I host a podcast called Ice Cream with Investors. I am a fat man in a skinny man's body. So we talk about ice cream and all sorts of delicious treats, as well as investing. And the podcast is really about all facets of real estate investing. I mean, when I got in this business, I thought it was fix and flip or buy turnkey and hold. I had no idea you could invest in parking lots, mobile home parks, debt funds, mezz debt, multifamily, all that sort of stuff. So we just try to cover all of that and have interesting conversations. If you want to talk to me or my partner specifically, you can go to nextlevelincome.com. And in the top right corner, there's a schedule a call link, which links to both of our calendars. So if you ever want to chat about investment opportunities or a deal that you've got going on, I like to tell people when I first started in this business, I had no one to talk to. It was literally listen to a podcast in my ear and talking to a realtor that I knew. So I am always happy to add value wherever I can, even if it's not our deal. If you just want a second set of eyes on it, I'm happy to always do that stuff for people.
That's awesome, Matt. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me and talking to my audience here. And I think a lot of the things you said will resonate with accredited investors, who are looking to create cash flow, looking to align their investment and their portfolio with their goals and things like that. So I strongly suggest anybody to reach out to Matt and talk more. And he's got a great podcast, and you'll learn a lot about different ice cream and desserts and, and things like that. And like you said, that's what I love about real estate. There's so many different flavors. I mean, I always use that term, thinking of like a Baskin Robbins or something like that, but there's so many different flavors. And that's what I love about it, and before the show started, we were talking about events and things like that. It's just, there's so many different ways to be involved in this business, from different asset classes, but then like from that capital acquisition, execution, like just even within an asset class, there's different things that, they're all working together to make it work. So that's awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time and talking to me today, and I hope to continue the conversation. I feel like there's so many different ways that we could have taken this, and I'd love to get further into anything, especially mobile home parks. As somebody who invests a lot in workforce affordable housing, I love that strategy, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Like you said, with it's a lot of mom and pop. It hasn't been completely institutionalized or anything like that. So good stuff, Matt. I appreciate you being here and talking to me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.